In 1939, I lent a young Bradbury $50. Every time he tells the tale, I don't know whether he's thinking in terms of inflation. After a while, it was $60 I lent him, and the last time I heard it, I think it was $75, but my memory is it was 50. That was enough for him to spend 3.5 days and nights on a Greyhound bus to get to the first World Science Fiction Convention, where he was busy getting autographs rather than giving them because he hadn't made his mark in the science fiction field yet. There were about 185 of us at that first World Convention, pretty big name for a fairly small affair considering we may have as many as 10,000 nowadays at World Conventions. I've been to 47 and a half of them. The half I missed out was in 1953 when I was on my way to New Orleans and my dad died and I gave up and came home for the funeral. But out of the 185 of us at that first World Con, we had a banquet, but so expensive that only 29 could afford it. It was $1 a plate. And several years ago, my wife entertained 186 science fiction personalities here in our home, one more than at the whole first World Science Fiction Convention. Well, when Ray was a young fellow, he's 4 years younger than I, he used to stand on a corner here in Los Angeles and sell a newspaper. I think it was called the Daily Record, 2 cents a copy. I don't know how much the newsboy got to keep out of each sale, but apparently for 2 hours selling it in the morning and 2 hours the evening edition, it was enough that he could, I believe it was for $5, rent a little hole in the wall, a garage a block or two down the street from his corner, and there he would sit with his mechanical typewriter and religiously write 5,000 words a day. And the night before he was married, he stood in front of an incinerator and became his own Fahrenheit 451 fireman. He burned 2 million words of Bradbury manuscripts, as he has always cared much more about the good opinion of posterity than the possibility of making a fast buck in presentarity. And we've seen what happened to Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard when they died, that well-meaning friends would find some little laundry list or title scribbled on the back of an envelope and bulk it up into a novel that would sell because of the byline of the dead author. And I guess Ray Bradbury felt if he died of ecstasy on his wedding night that he didn't want something similar to happen to him. He only wanted his own final product to be in print. I have seen him actually sitting with the 7th version of something that he's had published in magazine form, and now it's going into hardcover, where he realizes that it will not be ephemeral but will last a lifetime. And he generally seems to feel that he overwrites. I remember one manuscript I had of his, the first version and the 7th, I believe it was. And in the first one, a man is asleep in bed. He hears a noise down in the basement, and it takes him about 2 pages to get down to the basement and discover what the noise is. Frankly, I found it all highly fascinating. But in the 6 versions later, pow, the man hears the noise, and the next thing he's right down there in the basement. All these 2 pages of getting him down there are gone. I say Ray seems to believe in paring everything to the bone, just to the ultimate information that's necessary to tell the tale. Well, when he was a teenager and wanted to take a girl out for a date, it could be done for $1 in those days. It was 21 cents for admission for adults to a movie. We still had streetcars, 5 cents for a streetcar ride. And for a nickel, you got a nice giant Snickers or Abba Zaba or a bunch of Jujubes, not some little mini thing for 85 cents like we get in 1991. So I was always good $1 for a book. And one day in 1933, Ray apparently had an extra heavy date coming up because he needed $2 for it. Well, his excuse for the extra dollar was that King Kong had been turned into a book, and theoretically it was written by Edgar Wallace, who was the leading mystery author of the day in England. And Ray said, look, it's been signed by Edgar Wallace. Well, I was young and naive, and I didn't stop to question how did young Ray Bradbury get the autograph of a world-famous author 6,000 miles away in London. I hadn't heard anything about him visiting Los Angeles, so I gave him the extra dollar. Well, time marches on. About a quarter of a century later, I was living in the original Acker mansion, and rather smaller than this one. This has about 18 rooms, and that had only 13. But I'd accumulated so many friends that in order to have a birthday, I had to celebrate it 5 times, as we could only accommodate about 65 people at tops in the house. So I would start Friday night, Saturday matinee, Saturday night, Sunday matinee, and Sunday night. And this particular birthday, Ray Bradbury came on Sunday evening, and like the proverbial magnet attracting the iron filings, he had a cluster of his eagerly attentive fans around him, listening to his various fascinating anecdotes. And his eye fell upon this copy of King Kong, which he had sold me for $2 in 1933 because of the attraction of having the autograph of Edgar Wallace in it. Well, he gingerly picked it off the shelf, and he opened it up, and he said, "Oh, I have a terrible confession to make." He said, "I wrote that Edgar Wallace." I said, "You dirty dog, give me back my dollar." So he reached in his pocket and kind of blushed a bit and gave me back the dollar. And a couple of days later, I got to thinking about it, and I thought, well, probably Ray regrets he sold me that. He'd probably like to have it in his collection as it's kind of a corner piece and a story that's been very important. It was through King Kong that he became a lifelong friend with the great animator of dinosaurs, Ray Harryhausen. So I shopped around, and although it's a rather expensive collector's item by now, I finally in the mail found a copy of King Kong, purchased it, and sent it over to Ray Bradbury by Red Arrow special delivery, so it'd be handed to him at the door. And in it I wrote, "To Ray Bradbury, from the real Edgar Wallace."